Hi guys, welcome to Sports Scene Culture Conversations powered by Reebok. My name is Lerai and I am your host. Sports Scene created this platform for us as the youth to have meaningful conversations about topics that are usually sidelined. And today we're addressing the elephant in the room. As we're approaching the end of 16 Days of Activism, it was very important for us to have this specific conversation, especially as we're reaching the festive season. This time around, I'm going to let my panel introduce themselves as we have the conversation of gender-based violence. Shala, I'm going to start with you. Please tell me your name, your initiative, and why you're here.
Okay, I'm Shala. I'm a fine artist, doing my honors in fine art, and my work for this year has been based on data and research about gender-based violence, because I think one thing that this year taught us with COVID and everything is that connection is very important, and I've come up with a digital archive as part of my work, basically centered around data collection and reanalyzing reporting and what it means to see this violence, to experience it, and to try to understand it so that we could improve our response as like all citizens. And that's why I'm here today, to discuss my work and what we all need to do, all our roles. Yeah.
Hey Lerai, so I'm Daniel Banham, co-founder of Boys for Action. So Boys for Action is a committee of all boys schools where we feel it's the responsibility of the fathers of tomorrow to take action and be the change we want to see. So we've done many projects over the year, such as raise 1,000 girls, so raising sanitary pads for refugee girls living in South Africa. We've partnered with the Springboks, which provided just less than 60,000 Rand worth of food to vulnerable families, and we hope the initiative will eventually be a part of schools across South Africa, all boys schools, and we hope it is just the start of something big.
Hi, I'm Begi Sisa from POWA, People Opposing Women Abuse. So the organization does counseling and legal advice for survivors of gender-based violence. Our target is women and girls up to the age of 65. POWA continues to fight the surge because we've been in existence for over 40 years now. I've joined POWA like 9 years ago. I continue to offer counseling on a daily basis to women who are really affected. So to this platform, I'm bringing my experience, lived stories of other women who are going through domestic violence and rape.
Hi, I'm Hlengiwe Zwane. I'm a clinical psychologist, and I've been working with gender-based violence for a while, and it's one of my passionate topics. I'm here to bring therapy into your spaces and make it very accessible and easy to make sense of, but also demystify the whole idea of therapy is not for blacks, or it's for that race, or it's not for whites, or whatever, but bring it to the reality of how within our homes we can empower ourselves, empower children, parents to empower the youth, but also the youth to empower themselves. Make sense of the whole idea of how do you actually make it in a successful relationship in this day and age, because people still want to get married, actually. People still want to be in love, and there's such lots of terms that I've heard, situationships, vibing and all that. And as you hear all of that, in the midst of that, there's intimate partner violence that is such a big issue in our country. Like you were saying, as we go into the Easter, the Christmas time, this is where people are happy, but the question is, are they happy inside? So I want everybody to be happy. I'm about happiness, so I'm here for that.
Thank you.
Nice. So I'm Karabo Moshodi. I launched the pepper spray campaign last year, just after the Uyinene sentence shutdown protest. I started the campaign because I was just simply dissatisfied with the amount of initiatives that were around that were actually aimed at preventing these things from happening. And so I launched the campaign to donate 1,000 free pepper sprays to women and also give them basic self-defense training. And a lot of people always think that all we're doing is just giving away free pepper sprays, but it's just so much more than that. And you'll see it after we engage with the women and how they walk away feeling much more confident and feisty and empowered more than anything. So I'm here today on the show to raise awareness, first of all, about the different kinds of things that we can do in our own individual spaces to contribute towards building safer communities in South Africa and not having to always have to deal with the problem once it's already happened.
Mohammed, you are from Boys for Action as well, and Danielle has given us a brief, but please let me know what the boys' schools that are involved in Boys for Action, what exactly do you guys do and why did you start this initiative?
So I think the initiative as a whole is just about bridging the gap and getting closer to a society where there isn't such a difference, such a discrepancy that gender-based violence is even an argument or a conversation that we have to have. But so it's about doing those small things, creating those discussions, creating awareness, doing sanitary pad drives, all those kinds of things. And I think for me, ultimately as well, then it's about recognizing that we're in that space in all boys schools and that we have influence and can start that change from schools just to take it forward into society and maybe have a better future.
Right, so I think you pointed out that there's a lot of words that are being thrown around, and I think it's very important for us to actually define what we're speaking about today. What is gender-based violence and what are the different types? I'm throwing this question out here. Whoever wants to answer can answer it. What are the different types of gender-based violence?
Well, I think one of the interesting thing is when we're talking about gender-based violence, we have predominantly looked at women and children, and that has been the biggest affected group. But it doesn't necessarily mean men don't go through that. So as in the term, it is actually more of your violation of your gender, of your human rights, of your ability to be a self, an independent person. And I'm breaking it down as broadly as I can. But it does not necessarily mean that just because we are focusing on this area, it minimizes the other area. I'll cover one part of it as well, which is the intimate partner violence. This is like a subtype of the gender-based violence. This one involves where people are intimately in a relationship. This is people who are married, people who are in situationships, like I was saying. And interestingly enough, it's a term I learned last year or some time ago. It's a situationship for a person because there are no defined rules. And that is one of the biggest issues, because we start nicely, we are vibing, but after a while, there are friends with benefits. There's normally something where we have a triangle, kind of a situation where in a relationship that is successful, we have to have all three corners involved.
Sisa, being a social worker, can you please let us know what are the factors that contribute to gender-based violence?
Okay, the contributing factors involve the fact that we are a violent country, we are a violent society. Because of the gender of which it contributes to gender-based violence, we are told that masculinity, men are more superior to women, you see. So we grow up in such an environment whereby a girl is told, respect your brother. Already, we're planting a seed of inferiority, masculinity in a girl child. So that is a contributing factor to some extent. So other contributing factors are poverty. Because we grow up in a place where there's so much poverty, but gone are those days where we would say that domestic violence or gender-based violence only affects people who are poor. Yes. Now it cuts across all spheres, it cuts across all races, all classes, all ages. Actually, most of my clients are young people now, and all races, all classes. So poverty also contributes, because at the end of the day, women say, I'm staying in a relationship because I'm stranded, I don't have money, so I need to remain in that relationship. So those are some of the root causes of what GBV is.
Right. Thank you. I want to ask you this question because she touched on toxic masculinity that you've seen? Because you go to an all-boys school, I mean, you've been in these environments. What have you observed, amongst your peers, and how exactly that toxic masculinity is, how young boys are taught it and what it actually looks like?
So I think that's a great question, and I kind of see it in two tiers where if you just like look at high school specifically, between 14 and 16, so 8, 9 and 10, many of the boys they equate their self-worth to the objectification of women. So they feel as though, and I can even speak from personal experience, how the boys in grade 8, to sort of impress me as a prefect, they wanted to say, oh, I've had a relationship with 14 girls. And obviously that's unrealistic and I think quite gross in a sense, especially when you're just 13. But it just shows you how boys, they have this inherent idea of what they should be. And unfortunately, there hasn't been like a conversation, or they haven't been spoken to in a way that they can feel satisfied with themselves so that they don't have to do this. But as we go to like grade 11 and 12, I think that's where toxic masculinity changes, in the sense that they don't objectify women anymore. It's more of a sense of going to the gym, being the best guy on the sports field, specifically rugby, and doing those type of things. And I think as that progresses now, they feel that they're entitled to women.
So you run a campaign called the Pepper Spray campaign, and Danielle has just spoken about how boys have this feeling of, I guess, power, especially as you grow up and get older. What are you doing to, obviously you have the campaign, the Pepper Spray campaign, so what have you observed amongst the women that you've worked with and actually impacted their lives? What does it look like after they come out of interacting with the Pepper Spray campaign?
Yeah. So I think the main thing is there's such a huge need for the education of what exactly gender-based violence is, because in most situations it gets excused for something or the other. And so you asked us initially what GBV is, and to speak from my personal space, GBV is literally being discriminated, bullied and violated because of your gender. I like to think of it as the racism of gender, It's literally that. And it's like you're being discriminated, you're being pushed out of your space of rights. Like, so for example, if you're walking down the road and you're being catcalled, that is sexual harassment. When I interact with these ladies, the very first thing that I try to do is just to get them to realize how violated they are when certain things happen to them, and once they come to that realization that, yeah, actually we shouldn't have to be going through that. We shouldn't have to be getting catcalled and grabbed at the taxi ranks, on the streets. And once they come to that realization, it's almost like being educated about your basic rights, which I think there's also just like, that needs to be done a lot more, because it's like literally your right to freedom being violated.
I actually want to jump in on that one, actually, because we've been hearing and seeing all these stats about gender-based violence, especially within our country, and we were talking about it earlier on off camera. And how you, Shala, you mentioned that the stats of 1 in 3 women having gone through sexual assault or whatever it is actually not a real statistic. And it reminds me of, I've recently seen a post of a guy sharing his experience of sexual assault on a bus. And he was explaining what was going through his head, and the fact that he was a fully grown man who could definitely defend himself, but the reason why he didn't take some sort of action was because he was overthinking in his head, trying to make sense of what exactly was going on. And your archive is probably filled with people who haven't reported the cases that they've gone through. What have you observed with the people that have come to you right now? And you mentioned that you just got started recently. How many people have you had come to you, and what are the stories that you hear?
So there are many reasons why these stories and these incidents go unreported and undocumented. Is because while we are still trying to survive and just, on my way here, have to send my live location to loved ones, and I have to do that all the time because we are a constant reminder that we're in danger all the time. But not only just the fear of that, but also the fear that admitting or coming out with being abused, with being harassed, with being assaulted, raped, it actually subjects you to that, to more abuse. With our law and our system, that's completely against us. If someone has to come out with a report, they're faced with lawsuits, they're faced with, re-traumatization in the system already. Cops would ask you, why are you coming now? Why were you there? There's
what were you wearing?
There's incidents of police officers violating survivors, it's actually ridiculous. So the safe space is just so that we could actually measure the scope of the violence that we're experiencing and then know how to approach it after that, because this violence is not just something that's happening, it's something that we're so used to. It's now a language that we all understand, that we've been taught since we were young. Boys are taught violence and women are taught precaution and sacrifice as a means of love, as a means of living.
16 days is not enough,
No.
It's really something that needs to become a way of life where not just like raising the awareness of it, but providing people with the like little action steps that they can take in their everyday lives.
I think one of the things that makes it hard is when a person is not even sure what it is that just happened. So, for example, if you're in a relationship and this is your boyfriend and they're drunk and they say that, you know what, you owe me sex, you have to give me sex because you are my partner. After that, that person struggles to call it as violation because firstly, this is their partner.
Yeah.
Secondly, how do you go to your friends and tell your friends that your partner or your person did this to you? So there's shame in it. There's fear of what would this person do to me? But at the same time, if we now empower the self, there's something that we were saying about empowering with a paper spray that says that you have something, it takes your power in your hands. But I also want to say, in addition to that, take your power inside. If inside I know who I am, from young we have raised our children to understand who are you and understand yourself as a person. You are empowered. Same thing you're saying that you give people little things to say. I always say in some of the things that I do with people, stay with self. Because when you stay with self, you will know that this doesn't feel good.
Yes.
You will know that what you're feeling inside, you must speak up about it.
This is actually our first time having male guests on the show. So I know it might feel as if, we're attacking men in general, especially with this whole #MEnAreTrash movement. Mohammed, how does it feel just hearing us speak like this? And what do you as boys have these conversations and actually speak about gender-based violence that we are, what are you going through listening to all of this?
No, so it's very I think it's very different, the thoughts that go through our minds when we're listening to these conversations, because it's I think it's something we find difficult to process and understand because we live in the position of privilege. We're not constantly afraid, and I think oftentimes when we hear these sorts of stories, it's kind of shocking because we aren't really exposed to it as much as we think we are.
What can we quickly summarize? What are the root causes of gender-based violence?
To explain, like you're saying, that it's a cycle, it is indeed a cycle, because the root causes start from a point where, because of the way I was socialized, I believe that when I'm in love with somebody, I have to hold on to them forever, or try my very best to fight for my marriage or for my relationship. So that's where the problem is. Even when I'm going through abuse, I end up giving more and more chances, believing that maybe my partner will change, maybe my uncle can talk to him and then he's going to change. Maybe if he pays lobola, he loves me, he's the father of my children.
Yes.
So those that upbringing makes me actually remain in an abusive relationship from my point of view.
So it's the socialization and the fact that people aren't aware of what they're doing is wrong and you're affected by it. The victim is not the only person that is affected by this, right?
Yes.
Our culture also.
And then
our culture of how men have been taught to see women as things that can satisfy them and things that are like empty vessels to carry your child and your legacy, and that's it, nothing other than that. Because I mean, the way we're treated with that entitlement, I want this thing, it's mine, you're gonna give it to me, and if you don't, you're gonna bear the consequences.
So step 2 is the actual act of the violence and what happens. And we touched on the fact that there's different ways that a person can be harassed, right? It could be stalking, it could be through verbal abuse, it could be through in intimate relationships, anything like that, right? And then what the victim goes through when they're in that situation. I think what I want to, I'm curious, sorry, I'm curious to find out what exactly a victim should do when they find themselves in that situation, because I don't think we're socialized or taught exactly what to do. Like, do you run? What should a victim do when they find themselves in that situation?
I would like to say it's very difficult, domestic violence or sexual violence. I think by the time somebody reports it, it would have happened many times. It's very rare for someone to just get slapped by a boyfriend now and report immediately. At first you believe that, okay, did it happen to me? Or let me just tell my best friend. Should I tell my parents? Should I tell my family? You question yourself, you doubt yourself, and then you end up not doing anything about it. You may just cry about it, and because of the cycle of domestic violence, your partner is likely to come back to you and say, I'm sorry, I don't know what got into me, and I apologize. So that's where we end up giving chances over and over again up until we're numb to the abuse, because we think that because everyone is doing it, it's happening often, it's always on TV, it's always on media, maybe my partner is not so bad after all. It takes you much longer than it would take an empowered person to come out of an abusive relationship.
So step 3 would then be, what do I do afterwards? Like, do I report it once I'm numb to the situation? Do I report it the first time? Is it actually abuse? When do I report it, and who do I report it to? Do I tell my family or alert the justice system? What do I do?
I'd like to answer this question before handing it over to, I think, Begiso again, who I think, has, more insight on this. The one thing that I would really advise people to do is to tell as many of your trusted friends and family as possible, because sometimes you can tell that one person and they will be like, no, friend, and they'll try to talk you out of it. So it's really important to alert people around you and try to get their perspective, like, okay, so here's what happened, and I actually think I was violated. Because one of the things that I also realized with girls who find themselves in abusive relationships is that they stop telling their best friends what's happening, or they start sugarcoating, like, no, he just did this, like, but... And as a woman or as a man, once you find yourself starting to sugarcoat your situations, that's when you know that there's something wrong.
I like that, and it's very great. Speak out and don't keep it to yourself. Go talk. The fear of being humiliated, your privacy being... Already it's like your privacy is affected, right? But a lot of times there is numbness. And as you were talking, I could think of many people that said, I just went numb. I couldn't move. And should I go shower? Should I clean myself out because I feel so dirty? Or should I go out and speak? So my question to everyone is, what do we think that person should do? And I'm opening it up intentionally, not necessarily answering, to say, when I'm numb, when I'm scared, when I'm confused, at that time, what do we as the country say that person should do?
What you're saying is very important, because one thing that we are not taught, and it's so horrible that we have to even know, that we have to be taught this, is that actually, what do I as a victim have to do once I have gone through this? Why? When somebody goes through, like, for example, I'll use the example of rape. When somebody has been raped, right? They have to report it. But then what happens after that?
Yeah.
Because nobody knows what actually happens when somebody goes through that.
Yes.
You have to report it to the police. You need to make sure that you are holding that police officer or whoever is dealing with your case, that you need to hold them accountable. They need to visit the site as soon as possible, so that evidence is not tampered with. You need to know what to do. I think it's very important that you said you need to tell people around you, because as a victim, you've gone through all of this and you don't know what's going on. Once they have visited the site, there's a whole test kit that has to be done, a rape kit that has to be done. Where do we find the information of like, what do I need to do when I go through this thing, and to make sure that my case isn't being dragged out, because that happens a lot.
Sometimes during the time, a person dissociates, meaning there's a disconnect between the brain and the body. So whatever that is happening to you, not with you. So then now, how that is recorded in your episodic memory is quite messed up, because it may not be recorded as it is happening. You shut off and your body is going through the whole thing. So when you come out of it, your body comes out, you are numb. So that disconnect can actually cause you to suppress that memory so much that you go on. As we were talking earlier, I spoke about incongruency, that we're struggling to figure out how to smile and we are on camera because inside this is a difficult topic. So that is called incongruency, when what is happening inside and what you're showing outside doesn't correlate. That normally is caused by that disconnect. So when it disconnects, it's going to be difficult for me to know the steps of what to go and do. So in such cases, when that has happened, it is a matter of you are not necessarily going to deal with it all in one chunk, because the memory is scattered in your brain. So now incongruency has now developed, which is where now I'm looking like I'm happy, but inside I'm hurting. So I live with this depression that is called dysthymia. It used to be called that, now it's called persistent depressive disorder.
Persistent
depressive disorder. So persistently you are depressed for years, but you are happy. You look happy. And a lot of people that have gone through that have that. So you have had it for longer than 2 years, and consistently there's this underlying sadness, but you don't know why you're sad. You have all the money in the world, you're doing well in your career, at school, wherever, but you're sad.
So we've sort of defined the steps in the cycle, and I think there are more. There's things like cancel culture that, because this isn't being dealt with properly by our justice system, people want to take action themselves. But I think what we can do in wrapping up is just defining and finding out what are the resources that I can divert to for assistance in dealing with whatever it is that I'm going through. Boys for Action, what do you guys offer for boys within the schools?
So what Boys for Action offers is that we're trying to be similar to St. David's, in the sense that they have a great peer counseling program where grade 10 boys undergo education psychologically in the field of psychology, where boys can have someone to approach, because it's kind of difficult when you are dealing with stress, anxiety, peer pressure, to go to a teacher or even your parents. So that is what we're trying to implement going forward in all the schools.
What resources does POWA offer just to quickly define them? I know you did touch on them.
Okay, so we offer counseling, one-on-one sessions, we offer legal advice, we do court support, we support our clients by going with them to court, because like an example of my client who was stabbed. So by the time she goes to court, she's very scared, to meet the perpetrator, because at court the setting is very close. So we attend with them. And then on a normal day, we offer outreach programs, because like we're saying that these things are not taught at home. We take the information out to our communities, teaching young girls and women on what really domestic violence is.
How can our audience get in contact with POWA?
We are available at our offices. We also on social media is POWA on Facebook, POWA_ZA on Instagram and on Twitter.
With the pepper spray campaign, so for 2020, we had a goal of 1,000 women with 1,000 pepper sprays. And for 2021, the goal is to really reach a much higher number. And to be specific, it's 2.5 women that we're trying to get to, that we're trying to empower, that we're trying to educate on what it is to be violated and what you can do to protect yourself. And beyond just that, and speaking back to the whole thing of being your own resource, I've also been engaging with a lot of organizations that are aimed at educating young men on healthy, positive masculinity. And I contribute to those organizations because I realize that we cannot tackle GBV by just focusing and empowering women. We also need to engage men who are just as much part of and responsible for, you know, the situation we find ourselves in. I do believe that we need to start hearing more male voices. And if people want to get a hold of us, I'd encourage them to visit our website, which will lead them to all the different channels of how they can get involved. And it's www.outhereworldwide.org.
www.outhereworldwide.org.
Yeah.
Right. And how can I get in contact with you as a clinical psychologist and other psychologists if I'm seeking therapy or anything?
I work closely with Akiso. I think Akiso is broadly going into different provinces now, which is quite great. And in the different provinces, we can reach out to psychologists, social workers, occupational therapists, psychiatrists. And one of the things that we do here at Parktown, the Akiso at Parktown, is we have groups that go on within a 21-day period. You go through your healing process. So some of the triggers that can happen that you didn't know of or things from the past gets to be dealt with in the different groups because they empower you with skills of how to communicate with self. So you don't only do the individual, but you also do the group. Because in the group setting, then you get to realize you're not alone. It normalizes some of the things that you're feeling. We get to do family interventions with a social worker. So it's a multidisciplinary kind of approach. And multidisciplinary, in my view, is including each one of us here. It's even media and other fields to kind of bring that out. So for me, in terms of my side as a clinical psychologist, I'm in Rosebank. And the number is 011-880-0921. But I'm also on social medias. Facebook is Hlengiwe Zwane. The other one is Instagram is Hlengiwe Zwane with a double E at the end. So that's where I'm easily accessible.
Inshallah, how can I get in contact with you in the archive?
Okay, so the archive will be officially launched in February, and it'll be accessible to the public, and the public can engage and contribute to it. I will be on social media at Shala the Unicorn, and I will be updating, and I'll have a separate account launched with the site to give regular updates.
Please let us know in the comments down below what you have done for 16 Days of Activism. We'd really love to hear it out. And thank you to everyone that came and participated in this conversation. As Shala said, we're going to need a part 2 once again because it's so loaded. There's so much that we can speak about. But thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate your knowledge and your opinions in this conversation. So that was episode 4 of Sports Scene Culture Conversations powered for Reebok. Until next time.